Hello once again, I'm Extra Life. Thanks for meeting me over here in the kitchen. I've just been given a very generous gift of some synthesizer modules and accessories from a friend and a neighbor of mine who is getting out of the hardware business. And if you're watching, thank you very much, I appreciate it. And there are a lot of these kind of rough and ready prototype modules, as well as a few more finished products and some hand-etched boards, and some of them are actually quite deep. They extend a long way past the front panel, and they wouldn't fit into my regular synth case, and there's quite a few of them, so I wouldn't have room anyway. So today, I thought I might build a new DIY case out of just a couple of scraps of wood I've got laying around, something that's lightweight, easy to access the inside of, and doesn't take too much materials. So, let me show you what we're going to do. Okay, so here is a slab of pine that I've had sitting around for a while. I actually used some of this for my piano bench project, and as you can see, it's made from smaller strips of wood like this that have been joined together. I actually found this on the street. I don't know where it came from, but anyway, it's like a 3/4 inch by 8 inch board, and we're going to make the sides of the synth case out of it. You can see I've drawn some lines here. So each of these quadrilaterals is going to be one side of the synth case, and then we'll have the rail on which the modules mount will be sticking up this way, and then we'll have a row of modules here, another rail, a row of modules here, and then another rail. And the dimensions that we need to accommodate that are 11 5/16 inches along the top, and that's for standard 3/4 inch wood. That's the rails. If you've got different dimension of wood, then you might need to measure differently. And then the height is just the height of this piece of board, but you want it to be tall enough that if your modules are here, they're not going to hit the back of the case or the desk or whatever you happen to set this on. And the rails, it's better to use softwood. I've got some oak here that's about the right size, but doing this in hardwood, I have walnut rails in my regular case, and it's quite a pain to get these in without pre-drilling pilot holes, so I recommend using a softwood like pine. And since I've only got one of these, I need to go scrounge up some more. I cut out a couple of these pallet boards. As you can see, they're in pretty rough shape, but they are actually relatively straight and flat, so that'll work just fine for what we need it to do. So now I just need to rip these down to a size that's actually going to be useful. And I could make them this long, but that's a bit big for what I need, and I'd like to avoid this big knot here. So I think I'm just going to cut them right about here, and then maybe rip this in half and make the front and back rails a little bit deeper to give it more structural support, and then I'll use this one as the middle. Alright, so with all of these pieces cut to length and trimmed to size on the shooting board, we can kind of get an idea of what this is actually going to look like. You can see these are going to be attached up here so that they form more of a flush surface, and there'll be a gap here in the back where we can access the cables and stuff if we need to. So now, of course, we need to attach the sides of the case to the bottom and the rails. Another thing to consider is where you're mounting this and how you're attaching it. The simplest way, of course, is just to line them up at the corners and then drive some wood screws into the ends, and that's probably what I'm going to do. The thing to remember, of course, is that this wood screw, if it's right up here at the top, we're going to be mounting a module right here. We have to drive another screw in through the front here, and we don't want that to bump into the screw that we've driven in from the side, so we should make sure that this is at least an inch away from the top of the rail surface. Before I do that, I think I'm going to mount the bottom or back pieces to the sides just with some regular wood screws like that. Could do something more fancy here again, but you know, this is a rough and ready design. I'm not going to spend too much time on the joinery. And that way this thing will kind of stand up under its own strength, and we can mount the rails with a bit more precision. Alright, I'm just going to sink these screws in so that the tips are just barely poking out, and then I can use those to mark the ends of these boards so that we can drill some pilot holes. Since we're drilling into end grain, we don't want to just drive screws directly in. Really good chance it'll split the wood. But I don't want this to be flush with the bottom there, so I'm just going to shin this up about 1/4 inch. Once this is all kind of together in the corner, I'll hold it at the ends, and then just, I don't know if you can see that, but that has given us some marks where we can drill a couple of holes. So I'm getting ready to mount the back rail here in the back of the case, and one problem that I've discovered is because I've had to cut this angle on the rail so that the modules can mount on it not quite at 90 degrees. If the modules are deeper and they've got some of these longer circuit boards, they actually run into the back of this. So if we had been able to mount this perfectly square, that wouldn't be a problem, but because this angle is not quite 90 degrees, just because of the shortness of the board that I had, what I'm going to have to do is turn this into kind of a wedge, so I'm going to plane off along this edge so that we get a little bit more clearance back here. Whew, okay, so I just spent about a half hour reprofiling these with the block plane. You can see they're quite a bit thinner than they were. You can see my saw curve here because this knot was a bit too much to plane through. I just had to resaw it down to about here, and then I planed the rest of it flat. Okay, here is the final fit. You can see we're sort of flush with the front and the back on both edges, and we've got kind of a thin taper, and I've trimmed this board down a little bit, and both the modules in the front row and the back row have just a little bit of room to slide around. So this dimension up here was like 10 and 5/16. I would say round that up to at least 10 3/4 or 11 inches, and then you can actually adjust the rails to fit within that space rather than having to trim them down to make the modules fit. So yeah, do as I say, not as I do. Get some larger stock, make the sides a little bit bigger, you'll have a much easier time. And you can use 3/4 inch stock without having to worry about it overlapping. But on the middle it's nice because you can have two modules and they both fit quite perfectly. So I am going to get some screws in here and then we'll fit the middle rail. Okay, the back rail is screwed in. Screwing into that end grain in the knot there was kind of a pain, but we're ready to snug up this center rail and it fits nice and tight. One interesting option we have is to maybe inset this rail a little bit, and that way when we mount some of these modules, we'll get kind of a nice bevel effect where these are angled a little bit more towards us. Some of these modules are so long that if we have this middle rail any lower than it was, they just don't fit. So we're going to have to bring this up until that is flush. This, I think, is the largest module. At least I hope it is. I've left this in with just one screw so that it can adapt to whatever angle the modules end up sitting at. And it seems like it is going to have enough space, even for some of these Mondol modules with the PCBs that go way back. And should be able to just stack up modules, one on top and one down at the bottom. So this is a complete case, and it is ready to get stuffed full of tasty modules. Well, there you go. That is a weekend project eurorack case made out of 100% reclaimed and recycled materials. I think it came out all right. It's certainly very sturdy, and it has a lot more capacity than my other case. So I hope you found that helpful. If you're building a eurorack case for the first time, or you're just interested and maybe want a weekend project to experiment with, give this a shot. I'll give the general specifications for the measurements down in the description. I think in general this is a good design, but it does need a bit of tweaking with the way that these angles work in the back. This should be 90 degrees. It would make it a lot easier to mount this rail and fit deeper modules. Before I go, I want to say a huge thanks to everyone who is supporting me over on Patreon. It really means a lot to me to have your support. It means that I'm able to take the time to make and edit these videos and do these projects a bit more frequently. So thank you so much. And if you're interested in getting early access to new videos, as well as a little bit of bonus content, head over to patreon.com/extralife and become a supporter today. Well, I think that about does it. I hope you enjoyed this project as much as I did. I know I'm looking forward to using it, and I hope I get to show it off stuffed full of modules in the days and weeks to come. I'll see you next time.